Hey class, Michael here, and today I am going to talk about my research paper oral report. And for it, I chose the author option, and the author I chose was Roald Dahl. Now, Dahl lived a very interesting life, a very tragic life at that, but a very interesting life. He was born on September 13th, 1916, and he was born in Wales to Norwegian immigrant parents. And at the age of 3, he experienced some tragedy, some really deep tragedy in his life. His 7-year-old sister Astri, she died from appendicitis, and then a few weeks later, his father died at the age of 57 from pneumonia. And his mother decided to stay in England because her husband's wish was to give their children the best education, and he believed that England had the best education at the time. And so they stayed in England, and Dahl grew up in England, and he received his education. Funnily enough, one of his teachers commented that he didn't really have the best writing talent, which is kind of ironic because he is considered by many to be one of the best children's literature writers in history. And Dahl, before I continue, Dahl wrote Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Matilda, James and the Giant Peach, the BFG, the Big Friendly Giant, Fantastic Mr. Fox, and a few other books. He even wrote a few poems, and he even wrote an adult or more mature novel. And after he graduated from high school, he went into this is funny. He crossed the Atlantic Ocean in a boat to the United States, and then he got a job at the Shell Petroleum Company, and from there he stayed in Africa for a few years in the 1930s as an oil worker. He stayed in a luxury estate or luxury housing for the Shell Petroleum Company. But then World War II happened. In World War II, he joined the Royal Air Force, and he actually, at the beginning of the war, he crashed in Libya after a test run went wrong. He had crashed land. He actually ended up being momentarily blind, but he got his sight back. And then he was sent to Greece for the Battle of Athens, where he fought German planes, and he actually got a few confirmed kills, and he shot down some planes. He was even a part of the Battle of Athens, and after that, for a few months, he still served in the Royal Air Force. But then he started getting these really bad headaches that stopped him from flying a plane. And the Air Force is saying, "Okay, we're going to make you an officer, and we're sending you to Washington D.C. to the British Embassy, so that because this is 1940, this is pre Pearl Harbor." He was sent to the British Embassy in the Washington D.C. to gain support for the British people. And while he was there, he was actually contacted by C.S. Forrester, who was also another famous British writer, if I'm correct. And he was working for a magazine at the time, or a newspaper, and he talked to Dahl. He said, "Hey, the newspaper wants to hear about a story about a guy who was in the Royal Air Force and got shot down or something like that. And I understand that you have a story similar to that. Do you mind publishing it?" And Dahl said, "Sure." And Dahl published it, and they called it "Shot Down Over Libya." They dramatized it a bit to sell. And after the war, Dahl worked a few odd jobs, but eventually he got married to Patricia Neal. But then the 1960s hit, and in 1960, his son Theo got hit by a taxi while he was in his baby carriage. He survived, but he suffered hydrocephalus for the rest of his life. In 1962, his daughter Olivia died from measles encephalitis before a vaccine was made. Dahl actually commemorated her, and he dedicated the BFG to Olivia. And in 1965, his wife Patricia had 3 cerebral aneurysms while she was pregnant with her 5th child. They had 5 children together. Excuse me. He had to help her learn how to relearn how to walk and talk, and she did. After that, he began writing more novels, and some of them include in his novels. I'm not gonna lie, they have very dark themes. His life definitely influenced how his writing was presented. And for example, in The Witches, in the opening page, spoiler alert, but it's basically common knowledge by this point. The main character's parents die in a car wreck outside of Oslo, Norway, and he's raised by his grandmother. And that's in The Witches. All of his other novels or books are dark as well. For example, I'm going to use the BFG. And the BFG, the main character is Sophie, and she's kidnapped by the BFG. And in the book, they basically become good friends, and they have to stop the other giants. And so they get the help from the Queen of England. And long story short, to summarize it, they are able to successfully capture the giants and lock them away in a big hole in the ground. And the book, it's a good example of to use for a classroom, because the book, it's recommended for ages 8 through 10, grades 3 or 5, and has a lexile level of 720. And the book has a lot of applications to it. It can be used for text to text, text to self, or text to world. And for example, like this is funny for text to text or text to world. A good example of that. Dahl mentions himself at the end of the BFG. I won't spoil it, but it's pretty funny. Even though I just recapped the story. The book is written in the third-person omniscient view, and the narrator is reliable. And the book covers a lot of themes: justice, communication, and it has a lot of symbolism in it. Sophie, she basically becomes the hero of the story at the end. She's a heroine, the hero. She's the hero, and for methods to teach the story. Teachers can use different methods, such as questioning the students or asking the students to ask themselves questions, such as how did the characters mature? What was their plot? What was the plot? How was the plot structured? Yada yada. How do the characters mature throughout the story? How do they become stronger individuals? And you can use other like summarize. You can ask students to summarize it, and that's about it. Hope you enjoyed the video.